Welcome back to MythVision. This is probably going to be about a 10-second live stream. We just wanted to give you breaking news. Many people made many claims and claimed many prophecies would come to pass, and they didn't. And so if you didn't know, they failed. I hope you have a wonderful day, everybody. It was a great episode. Kip, thanks for being here just to put your PhD stamp on that.
Yeah.
And
anytime.
Have a good one.
I'm happy to prostitute my credentials for
absolutely. Let's get out of here, bro.
For a price, right?
Right. Yeah. Thanks a lot, everybody. Welcome to MythVision. Subscribe to our guests, or else our all-loving, all-powerful, omniscient mind that we are will punish you because we love you and we expect you to subscribe and whatnot. So Dr. Kill is in the house. I've got Matthew Hartkey, for those who don't know, in the flesh. So you docetist, shut your mouth and don't even act like you know. I know. This is him.
Until today, I always just thought Matthew Hartkey was Chat GPT. So
no, touch my hands. See, are they not real?
Oh my gosh. You know, the other day, the Egyptologist I had, Karakuni, was like, look at the medieval scar, the scar on Jesus' side. It's actually a vagina. And I was like, are you serious? I looked it up. She wasn't kidding. So it made me really weirded out just now when you said, touch my hands. And I'm like, kids, turn off. Kids, turn off.
Got to put a rating on this one.
Well, everybody in the chat, welcome in. If you feel like harassing us, you feel like challenging us, you feel like you just want to slap a question or a topic or whatever, feel free to. We do take those in the form of super chats, obviously. It's what keeps God's business running. You know, you got to tithe at least 10% or else. But seriously, we've done some recordings, Matt. Mm-hmm. Like 2.
Yep. might do some more. This guy is crazy. He is a machine. He's just constantly churning out content. I'm like 2 videos and I'm like, okay, I've done 2 videos over the last 2 years, so I'm good. This is quite the rate of acceleration for me.
Kip knows all about it.
I know all about it. He's always working on everything except for editing course videos. He's
of course.
The shade.
Of course, you know what? I really do.
This course is never going to come out.
Oh, yes, it is. Yes.
How long, oh Lord? How long?
How long, oh Lord? How long?
Well, look, we need to address the subject matter of the live, and that is Bible prophecy fails.
Should I become a preterist with regards to with regards?
It's already. Didn't you see? It's already been up. The course is available now. I've seen it. It's great.
Y'all need to stop. Yeah, so Matt has come to a conclusion where the best hypotheses he can think of is that cognitive dissonance is explaining all the above, like spiritualizing passages to it didn't happen passages, recalculation passages and stuff. It seems to best fit all of the data.
I think it has a lot of explanatory scope and a lot of explanatory power. I wouldn't say it explains. I don't think there is any such thing as one hypothesis that explains all the data. But I think that cognitive dissonance does have a lot going for it. And
I saw these. You say that, but then didn't Joel Edmund Anderson write this powerful rebuttal of
Matt
ideas?
I've been debunked. I've been debunked.
And,
so
he's a scholar on his level of his caliber.
Mm-hmm.
He pantsed you, dude. Yes.
But you know what he doesn't know? Matthew likes to get pantsed. Okay?
You gotta don't share my secrets.
Okay. Hold on. So I was joking.
I was also
back to the topic. So there's a lot of stuff you brought up last night. The idea that Micah gets mentioned in Jeremiah,
yeah,
and how Robert Carroll handles this thing.
Yeah, this one blew my mind when I read it in Robert Carroll's commentary on Jeremiah. But what I'm really fascinated with right now is the way that the Jewish and Christian prophetic and apocalyptic traditions are constantly doing hermeneutical work to explain earlier prophetic and apocalyptic traditions and hold on to their inspired high status while still making them relevant for today. And the way that Robert Carroll in his commentary on Jeremiah cites a really early example of this. And he, according to Carroll, he says that it's actually the only example in the early prophetic traditions of the Bible where we have a prophet citing a prophetic text, explicitly citing, quoting an earlier prophetic text and doing exegetical work with that, doing hermeneutical work, mounting an argument, a theological argument about the way that God works and employing that earlier text in order to make his point. And the passage is Jeremiah 26:19. And the passage that it's quoting is Micah 3:12. And Micah 3:12 is this prophecy of doom, of judgment on Judah, on Jerusalem, where it's saying that Zion is going to become like a wooded plain. It's going to be completely desolate, basically. And Jeremiah quotes that and says, but, you know, didn't the people repent, and didn't God then relent of the disaster that he had said he would do against Judah? And it's this place where Jeremiah, because the text of Jeremiah has this view, this Deuteronomistic view of prophecy as being contingent upon human response, so that we have in a passage like Jeremiah 18, it says, God says, whenever I speak concerning a nation to bring judgment on them, if they repent, I won't bring that judgment that I promised. Instead, I'll bring blessing. But if they don't follow me and I've prophesied blessings, then I won't bring those blessings, and instead I'll bring judgment. And so Jeremiah pulls from Micah in order to make that point about the contingency of all prophecy. Problem is that Micah doesn't give any indication of being a conditional prophecy at all. And it seems like, if anything, scholars like Klaus Koch and Robert Carroll also argue that, like, if there is any kind of extension of the opportunity of repentance that would change God's mind, that's not explicit in the text at all. And there are several places in the text of Micah where it actually says, like, you won't be able to remove your necks from the judgment that I'm bringing against you. Like, if you cry out to me, I won't hear your prayers, because this train is coming and you can't stop it. But the thing is that the complete destruction of Judah, the complete destruction of Jerusalem that Micah prophesied, didn't happen. And so Jeremiah, or the editors of Jeremiah, are dealing with the fact that here's an unfulfilled prophecy. And so Jeremiah superimposes its own Deuteronomistic theology onto Micah and reinterprets Micah so that it becomes a contingent prophecy and fits the theology of Jeremiah, and thereby gets it off the hook, gets God off the hook for this unfulfilled prophecy of destruction that didn't happen. And says, well, didn't the people repent? And that's why God changed his mind and didn't bring the thing. And so Micah is still the word of the Lord. It's still the word of the Lord, and we can still believe it, but it was contingent. It was conditional.
That all sounds very convenient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I've read Carroll, but I believe he was toying with the idea too that Jeremiah was a literary creation. Am I right about that? It's
I mean, he definitely sees a lot of redaction going on, and it not being a coherent, piece from one person. But there are early texts from the prophet of Jeremiah, and then there's a lot of layers of editing and redactional work on top of that. I don't know about a complete literary creation if he does toy with that.
No, I remember he's not I don't think he ever goes that far, but other scholars certainly have. Like I know I was at a conference a while ago about Jeremiah, and Reinhard Kratz gave a very interesting paper about Jeremiah as an invented literary figure. I don't particularly like the idea, because I'm sort of a I mean, one of the things that I love most about the Bible is all the drama.
Yeah.
So for me, it's just way more fun if we can push that historical envelope as far as possible, right? Which is why I'm still, I'm totally aware of the of the exceptionally poor quality of evidence we have for someone like an historical David, but god damn it, I want there to be an historical David, right?
Hey, I was talking, wasn't I talking to you about this yesterday, just briefly?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, the guy's like a mob boss, dude. I mean, who doesn't want a Game of Thrones guy is really existing?
And same with Jeremiah too. Like when I read Jeremiah, one of the things that I think is so really interesting on maybe another level than any of the other prophets of that book is just how intensely personal it is.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh my God, I so badly want this guy to be like a real guy. So yeah. Sorry, I just that's kind of off topic, but I mentioned Jeremiah and I'm gonna
totally. I mean, the thing that fascinates me with all of this, though, talking about the drama of the biblical tradition, and I mean, the thing, what is so interesting to me about cognitive dissonance is the way that it gets into that drama. And I mean, if we just talk about, prophecy fails, that's one thing, but what's more interesting than just the observation that prophecy fails is how the communities that believe in that prophecy maintain belief in spite of the failure, and the way that a prophetic tradition like the Jeremiah corpus, or like the Isaiah traditions, Isaiah and Deutero-Isaiah and Trito-Isaiah, and the book of Daniel. I mean, something as explicit as Daniel saying the exact day, the exact length of time that this stuff is going to happen in. And the fact that we still, over, 2,200 years later, believe in it, and think that like, oh, it's actually talking about our future, and do the hermeneutical work necessary to recover those texts, and still believe in them as the word of God. That is what's fascinating to me. And the way that, I mean, Robert Carroll's book, When Prophecy Failed, is all about the way that the prophetic traditions are doing that. It's such a good book. It's dry, but it has so many gems in it. And he focuses a lot on the Isaiah traditions.
Oh, I mirrored our camera. That's why it's backwards. When prophecy fails.
Yeah.
It looks fine to me, Derek.
You're able to read that like straight up?
Oh yeah. No, it looks good. And I just checked the YouTube feed and it looks fine.
Oh, nice.
It looks backwards to us, but that's odd. Let me see. Oh, it is.
No, right?
That's wild. Okay, cool.
Interesting.
Very.
But I would love to hear from you, Kip, especially like about with your expertise in the Dead Sea Scrolls, because we have the Habakkuk Pesher, the commentary on Habakkuk from the Dead Sea sect, and the way that they're dealing with passages from Habakkuk and saying that these are about our time, but seem to be dealing with an element of delay, and interpreting Habakkuk in such a way that it accounts for the delay of their expectations, so that they can maintain the truth of their belief in the teacher of righteousness and so forth. But I mean, I think they're a fascinating example of that reinterpretation of failure.
So and I really think like this is when Derek mentioned to me you know, uh, 75 odd minutes ago or so that he wanted to do this
Sprung it
stream.
on you.
Oh, we're gonna talk about cognitive dissonance and apocalypticism, and if you could, just draw
Stop
from
everything you're doing right now and come and join me.
yeah, that and oh, by the way, it'd be great if you could pull up some shit on the Habakkuk Pesher while you're at it too.
Yeah.
So,
While you're
but as I was thinking through this, in my mind, I'm like, yeah, like it's there. You have two things working at Qumran, and the really interesting thing that happens when we look at Qumran is because there's no Essene. Well, I guess there are Essenes still. These ridiculous people who call themselves Essenes, but the Essenes are gone.
Yeah.
The Jewish Essenes are gone. They all died. The movement ended. Nobody is going to look back at the literature of the Essenes and say they got it right. But the funny thing is that if we look back at the literature of the Essenes, we can look at stuff, and we'll talk a little bit about both of this. We can look at stuff and say, yeah, they totally said this was going to happen, and it didn't happen. But then, but look, they've got all this stuff where they talked about how there's prophecies in the Bible that are being fulfilled and have been fulfilled and were the proof of that, right? Like that's what the Habakkuk Pesher is. If people are unaware, this is a smallish manuscript. It's and we have pretty much like the whole thing. It was one of the very first of the scrolls discovered. It was one of the first three discovered and sold. It's I think 15 lines per column, and I think 11 columns in total, and it's just the first three chapters of Habakkuk, and I opened it up here, to take a look at it. Like the text begins at the very top of the Habakkuk Pesher. This is reconstructed a little bit, but something to the effect of oracle received by the prophet Habakkuk in a vision is just how it starts, right? For how long, Yahweh, do I ask? And now he's quoting from Habakkuk. For how long, Yahweh, do I ask for help without you hearing me? Shout violence to you without you saving me. And then there's a break, and the scroll continues. The interpretation of this concerns the beginning of the generation, and then there's close to the beginning. There's some missing bits that we can't quite fill in completely accurately, which will come upon them. They will shout against. There's another quotation of a bit of text from Habakkuk. And, it follows with another interpretation, but the entire text is structured this way. And this manuscript comes from pretty late, I believe, in the in the life of what we believe to be the community that wrote and collected the Dead Sea Scrolls. So this is from around the mid to late first century BCE. I think I'd have to go back and double check that. So
is this
there's beautiful pictures of it. Yes. So and you can see exactly there on the right hand side why they've had to reconstruct a bunch of it, because lots of the text is missing. But as you move further into the scroll, you've got lots of complete bits, and of course the bottom part of the manuscript has unfortunately worn away to nothing. But this was a manuscript that was written by the people who wrote and collected these scrolls from Qumran.
When did they date this?
I think so. I have to double check, but if you hold on for just a second,
okay.
and if I look closely at the handwriting here, I could probably give you a bit of a ballpark. So this is probably just guessing here. So don't take this as gospel. Haha. But this is probably like mid 1st century BCE. But yeah, I'd have to take a closer look at it, and I I hadn't taken the time to actually look at the date either before I opened it up. So this is it's this is while it's written as this as this perspective on the prophecies of Habakkuk. This is also a very important historical text, and one from which scholars reconstruct a lot of the history of the community itself, because there's a lot of wild things that are in here, in terms of how he's looking at the book of Habakkuk, whoever wrote and put this together, and then understanding what the book of Habakkuk actually means. So I'll pick up some of this here. Let's go to column 7. All right. So, and here he's he's starting with Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 2. And at the very top of column 7, it says, God told Habakkuk to write what was going to happen to the last generation, but he did not let him know the consummation of the era. Right? So the author here is basically saying, Habakkuk wrote this prophecy, but he didn't have a clear understanding that he was actually writing
about us,
not about the Assyrians, right? He's actually writing about us. He's actually writing about what's happening now. So
kind of like Paul does that weird thing where he talks about you shall not muzzle an oxen while it threshes, and then he goes, he's not talking about oxen, he's talking about us. And it's like, dude, he's talking about oxen in the original context.
This is, and I say this so often when it comes to looking at the way the Old Testament is handled in the New Testament, right? And I say this over and over and over again. These people were just doing good Jewish Bible exegesis. This is how they read the text. They didn't care so much about, well, did this actually happen? Is this, how much does this align with the with the writings of the Babylonians or the texts of the Greeks? Can we actually believe in an historical Daniel? These aren't the questions that these people were asking when they looked at the text, right? This was God's word to us, but it wasn't. And because it was God's word, because it was for us in their imagination, this doesn't have anything to do with what happened then. Mm-hmm. It has to do with what's going on right now. So this is, one of the signs of what scholars like to talk about, this at what point a text becomes, emerges from being just a popular old ancient text to being scripture, right? Something that's inspired or sacred or authoritative. One of the signs of that is this: at the point at which readers are starting to look at it and say, it doesn't mean just what it says it means, but there's secret messages in here from God, right? So we can actually read this and figure out esoteric things, secret things, hidden things that mean something for us today, that were written hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And in that sense, it becomes like fulfilled prophecy. So I'm just going to
In
read a little bit of
Habakkuk,
this,
though,
right?
just to be on the same page, you're suggesting, simply put, this Pesher, which is a Dead Sea Scroll Pesher, is saying
Yep.
Habakkuk wrote these prophecies God told him to. He was ignorant of knowing it's actually speaking about us today, but
That is
this,
what he says.
yep, they're
That's
about
what he
us.
says.
And that they're the
So-
last generation. So this
Yeah,
Essene
exactly.
group thinks this
So
is it.
These people, they're one of the reasons we believe that they're sitting out in the Judean desert at this site is because their expectation is that this world is coming to an end imminently. It's happening, now, soon. And for them, this was and again, this is in part they're living out the fulfillment of what they see as a prophecy in 1QS, the Serka Yachad, column 8. One of my favorite, this is one of my favorite texts. 1QS actually cites it quotes Isaiah chapter 40 verse 3, which is a very, very popular, famous text for Christians, because this is a text that appears in all 4 of the Gospels right at the beginning, and it says, a voice is crying in the wilderness, go out and prepare the way of the Lord, make straight the paths of our God. Of course, the gospel writers all said this is a prophecy about the coming of John the Baptist, who is going to, spark this movement of the new kingdom, which was going to be fulfilled in Jesus, and he was going to do so by baptizing people in the Jordan Valley, out in the wilderness. So this passage appears in 1QS, but the way without changing a single word of this text, this is why I think it's so brilliant. The people who wrote and collected the Dead Sea Scrolls have come to understand it completely differently. So when they read Isaiah 43, they read in the wilderness. Sorry, they read a voice cries out, comma, in the wilderness, go and prepare the way of Yahweh, make straight the paths of our God. So what they're doing is they're saying this passage from Isaiah 40 verse 3 is actually instructive to us to get out into the wilderness and get ready for the coming of Yahweh. Right? So this is and I think it's amazing because it's the same text.
Yeah.
It's the same text.
Yeah.
It's the words are identical. They didn't have to change anything to come to two completely different understandings of what this text is actually about. So, like, this is what's going on here, but I'm going to just read a little bit more about how this works, right? So Habakkuk chapter 2 verse 2. So that the one who reads it, and for what he says, so that may there's an issue here with the text. The one who reads it, its interpretation concerns the teacher of righteousness. This is the leader, the founder of this community. We don't know a lot about him. He's never identified explicitly. Scholars tend to think that this is a figure who had something to do with the Jerusalem priesthood during or shortly thereafter, after the Hasmonean revolt, and was disenfranchised from the priesthood, and had a major dispute with the priesthood in Jerusalem, and went off and kind of started doing his own thing as a result of this. So this concerns the teacher of righteousness, to whom God has made known all the mysteries of the words of his servants the prophets. Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 3. For the vision has an appointed time. It will have an end and not fail. So that's the text from Habakkuk, right? And then the Habakkuk Pesher continues, and it uses this word pishto, which basically means its interpretation. Its interpretation. The final age will be extended and go beyond all that the prophets say, because the mysteries of God are wonderful. And then he continues, Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 3 continued. Though it may tarry, wait for it. It definitely has to come and will not delay. Its interpretation concerns the men of truth, those who observe the law, whose hands will not desert the service of truth when the final age is extended beyond them, because all the ages of God will come at the right time, as he established. For them it is the mysteries of his prudence. The text continues. See, it is conceited to say, and it is conceited and does not give way his soul within him. Its interpretation. They will double upon them. Something's missing. Find no mercy at being judged. Something's missing. So, but I hope people can see and appreciate what's happening here, where all this guy is doing is he's looking at these ancient texts. He's completely oblivious. And maybe I shouldn't say that. He just doesn't care. That's a type of oblivion. He's maybe a better way of saying is that biblical exegesis in this period operates on a sense of treating the contents almost in an obtuse manner, whereby doesn't matter what.
It's kind of an ignorant, it's kind of a naive egocentrism where it's just,
yes,
you're not even,
yes,
God wrote this, it's inspired, and you're thinking about your own life and your own present situation, the problem of evil as it affects you, where you're standing in history, and you're wanting God's answer to that present distress that you're living in. And so you read the Bible, just as today, we would, I don't know if you guys ever did this, but the Russian roulette thing that you do, you just flip it and boom.
This
what
is
did
God
you say to me,
speaking
God?
to me today.
They were doing the exact same thing and finding those places where it seemed like God was going to speak to them. And it's that egocentrism that I often, like, as I kind of, evolved out of the like fundamentalism and the kind of dispensationalist futurism of my youth, I wanted to kind of absolve the biblical writers of doing that kind of thing. And so the way that the New Testament writers often quote the Old Testament and say, this is about us, I wanted to try and like get them out of that and say, no, that's just that's a modern dispensationalist way of reading these texts. They didn't actually, when Matthew was talking about this was to fulfill that which was spoken, he was really saying like, this is kind of a pattern, that this is in that same kind of pattern. It fits within the larger biblical story and history repeats itself. But like the early Christians were doing the same kind of thing that the Qumran community was doing and saying, no. This prophecy, this, even not prophecies, just Psalms and historical narratives, anything.
Bobby took his dog to the lake.
Parallelomania, where they're just like, this is about us, and you just cut and paste that.
Well, that's why I was saying, can I pull up that one passage real quick here? I think it's worth it. 1 Corinthians 9, I believe it is. I know it because I always talk about it. Paul's talking about money, okay, and he's talking about rights as an apostle. Have I not seen our Lord? Are you not the result of my work in the Lord? Even though I may not be an apostle to others, surely I am to you! ! For you are the seal of my apostleship in the Lord. Scrolling down. Verse 8. Do I say this merely? Okay, let me go up. Who serves as a soldier at his own expense? Who plants a vineyard and does not eat its grapes? Who tends a flock and does not drink the milk? He's trying to say, why am I not getting paid? Why am I not treated like the other apostles? Then he says, do I say this merely on human authority? Doesn't the law say the same thing? Well, what does the law say, Paul? For it is written in the law of Moses, do not muzzle an ox while it is treading out the grain. Oh, okay, that's what it says. Is it about oxen that God is concerned? Surely he says this for us, doesn't he? Yes, this was written for us because whoever plows and threshes should be able to do so in the hope. You can't even get through a normal mundane law about not muzzling your oxen so it doesn't eat while it's working without it meaning, oh, it's actually talking about me because I'm a last days prophet and this is all talk about me and what I've got going on. That's Paul.
Well, and then in the next chapter, he in 1 Corinthians 10, where he says, these things happened as an example, and they're really about us, upon whom the end of the ages has come.
Exactly.
So it's like this was all just prefiguring our own time. And the point is that it's all leading to this place where we are now.
And this is what the Habakkuk, Pesher, the teacher of righteousness, this group's doing the same thing.
I need to say something about this too, because this is good. Actually, this fits right in the next video in my series, The Dead Sea Scrolls Unapologetically, is about prophecy and Pesher exegesis, and it's a little bit behind because I've had a bunch of other things that I got to get done this month, but
like courses.
So, I have nothing to do with that. That's on Derek, but I've got a few other things.
He's gonna blame me forever. Listen, I'm doing this for our predecessors in 3,000 years.
Where does the buck stop, Derek? Where does the buck stop? There are a handful of texts from the Dead Sea Scrolls, which are really interesting. And when scholars first started seeing them and reading them, they developed this whole category of texts that they call Pesherim, and it's based on this word Pesher, Pishto, which you see in the Habakkuk Pesher, and this indicates a special kind of treatment of the text. They've been identified as like the earliest form of like an integrated commentary on the biblical text, which is pretty exciting. I think it also illustrates a particular method with regards to treating the text, and they're not just. We have the Habakkuk Pesher. We have a nearly complete text of the book of Nahum. There's a Pesher for that. There's one for the book of Micah. I think there's 2 copies of Peshers for Isaiah, and there's a Pesher for the book of Psalms. There's another manuscript that's very intriguing, which has been called what is this? What is it called? It's the commentary on the book of Genesis. And my Dr. Fodder did his he wrote the edition for this this manuscript, and has argued pretty persuasively that this is a very early stage of this type of exegetical handling of the text, and this on the basis of he sees, within this text we start to see a transition whereby, like at an earlier period, much of the literature that we have in the Dead Sea Scrolls, which deals with what we understand to be scripture, is of the type where it's like very intrusively just entering the text and changing it, and very explicitly altering what's within the text to help to make it more sense, or to provide it some sort of contemporary meaning and application. So we see this taking place within the so-called commentary of Genesis, but then you also see some of these types of Pesher interpretation. So, but I mentioned that just as a means to show we have specific examples from Qumran where this is taking place, not just within texts that we would understand to be prophetic, but like you said, the book of Psalms, It's happening in the book of Genesis. But oftentimes when it comes to this, I am giving people two messages here. The first thing I want people to understand and to know is that this is normal, right? This is just what everyone did with their favorite texts, because quite often the temptation on one side is to say, well, look at what the Gospels are doing with the Old Testament. They can't even read it properly. They're taking it out of context. They're misunderstanding and they're misappropriating things, and they're changing the meaning of it. And this is so dishonest. It's so disingenuous. No, this is not. This is just how you read texts back then. That's how they functioned. That's what they were for. And then on the other side of this, I think it's important to point out that, yeah, this is what everyone was doing. And in so doing was arriving at exactly the same results. As I pointed out, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, you want to talk about fulfilled prophecy? Let's talk about all the fulfilled prophecies in the Pesher Habakkuk. Let's talk about all the fulfilled prophecies in the Pesher Nahum, in Pesher Isaiah, or in the commentary of Genesis. Because from their perspective,
it's fulfilled. Certain things.
It's all fulfilled.
Well, they're still expecting that to be the last generation, that kind of stuff, right? Yeah. So, like, kind of like the New Testament says, this is fulfilled, like this is being fulfilled right now. It is written, and look, it's being fulfilled in front of your eyes. Yeah, all of that's happening, but there's still kind of future expectations, and those fell, is what you're saying.
A little bit, yeah. So, and we have to go somewhere else. Like what the Peshers are what the Pesherim by and large do is say we're using these texts of scripture, these old prophecies, as a way to legitimate what we're doing now.
Makes sense,
right? But there's another thing that's happening at Qumran, and that's to kind of give you a sense of what's going on there. Let's take a look at the War Scroll. So I just have to say, like, this is a picture of one of my favorite manuscripts in the entire world. This is 4Q Jeremiah, or sorry, no, this is 4Q MA. This is a copy of text from the War Scroll. The War Scroll was discovered also in Cave 1, and it's not quite intact, but it's largely intact. We have most of it. It's a really, really challenging text. People for a long time, and it's maybe the best comparative text that we have for something like the Book of Revelation in the New Testament, but it's not the Book of Revelation. The War Scroll is like a rule text. It's loaded with things that you have to make sure that you're doing in preparation for this great eschatological war that's going to be taking place. It's a collection of songs and hymns, which you sing and you perform, either anticipation. I don't know if Alex Jason, who teaches at NYU, has written about this and suggested that when it came to the War Scroll, this is stuff that like these songs and these rituals that we see within there, they were actually like this is part of a regular liturgy that they were enacting and reciting and chanting and like you would in I guess, I don't know, an Anglican or Coptic church or something like that, right? So but then it's also loaded with a bunch of expectation about what's going to happen. So there's a narration within there about what's going to happen in the last days, in the war between the sons of light and the sons of darkness. And I need to point out, so so one of the reasons I pointed out this manuscript there's a couple things that are very interesting that's going on here. So this is there's not just the copy of the War Scroll from Cave 1. That's the largest copy, and it was the first one that was discovered. But then there were 4 or 5 other manuscripts, fragmentary copies of things that looked very much like the War Scroll that were found in Cave 4. Another one also found in Cave 11. But importantly, these texts differ pretty dramatically also from the copy of the War Scroll that we discovered in Cave 1. And this is very exciting because what we see happening here is that we've got traditions, individual larger blocks of texts that are being strung together. And you can see the text itself developing over time from earlier versions, some of which we have in K4. This is probably an exemplar of one of the earliest, to something that was much late, that was not that much later, maybe 60 years. The text has changed dramatically into now this copy that we have in the K1 copy. And the other really interesting thing about this manuscript is that this particular fragment that I have here is 2 columns, right? So this is the first column, and then there's a break here, and then there's a second column, and your audience can't see it, but there's actually 2 different hands. This was written by a scribe, and then this column was written by a different scribe. So we have a bunch of fragments from this manuscript, and the real fun is attempting to put them together, because the original editor, Maurice Baillet, he just, when he was going through the fragments, he just said, well, I'm gonna put this together in the same way that it matches, the War Scroll from Qumran Cave 1. But when he did this, what he ended up doing is putting stuff, because he didn't recognize, it's subtle, the difference between the 2 different handwritings is pretty subtle. So he apparently didn't notice the difference and ended up just following the layout of what I call 1QM, the War Scroll, and in so doing had stuff written by scribe A next to stuff written by scribe B, and then back to scribe A again, and so it didn't make any sense at all. So what's really interesting, and what scholars are working on right now, in particular with this manuscript, is trying to figure out what this looked like. And what we are discovering is that the order of material here is dramatically different than what appears in 1QM. So lots of the same kinds of traditions with development in them, but in totally different orders. So I'm sorry, I just get excited about this kind of stuff. So I'm just gonna pull up column 17 of 1QM. is really cool, because so this is the expectation that the people had of what was going to happen in this eschatological war that they were getting ready for. They had this belief that there was going to be a global, from their perspective, a global war. All the nations of the earth were going to start. They were going to descend on Palestine, Roman Palestine, Israel, Judah, and they were going to have this total conflict, and it was going to be the sons of light, as they identified themselves. They are the true followers of God, and they were going to be fighting alongside literal angels. One of the neat things in the War Scroll is all these rules have to do with how the camps are to be set up, and how people are to get themselves ready for for fighting in this war, right? And the rules in the camp are incredibly strict in terms of purity and in terms of what you can do and can't do. And the reason for that is because they were certain that they were going to be living and fighting alongside the angels in God's army. And because of this, you had to make sure that, you know, you had to make sure that you were as pure, as ritually pure as absolutely possible, right? So this war was going to happen, and all the sons of light and who were the true followers of God, this tiny little minority, small group of people fighting alongside the angels, was going to be up against the force of all the nations, all the all the bad Jews, all the Jews who didn't think like they did, were also going to be within this group called the Sons of Darkness, and they were going to be fighting in the camp of Belial, which was the name that the writers and collectors of the Dead Sea Scrolls had for the devil, for their view of Satan, right? Never called him, or as far as I know, I don't know. I have to look back on that on Satan and the Dead Sea Scrolls, but more often than not, he was called Belial. Sometimes he was these demons were called the angels of the Mastamot or angels of Mastama. Sometimes they were called the Shadim, but the forces of Belial are what's featured in the War Scroll, and there's going to be 7 battles, and after 6 of them, it's going to be a tie. 3 of them are going to go to, you know, the sons of God or the sons of light and the angels and God, and 3 of them are going to be won by all the nations and Belial and the sons of darkness. And then in the final battle, God's gonna himself like intervene and then just, you know, wipe everybody out, right? So it's this wild, interesting text, of course, because this is an expected cosmic battle, but it also involves real people. For them, the enemy, the representation of the human enemy was always the Romans, and the people who collected the Dead Sea Scrolls called the Romans the Kittim, which is a term that was pulled out of the Hebrew Bible and applied to the Romans or to people who lived on the other side of the Aegean, basically there, right? So I'm just going to read a little bit of column 17, and this is just kind of at the crux of the battle, the last battle when they're finally going to win. Here's what it says. He has placed their success in the burning something, those tested in the crucible. He has whetted her weapons of war, and they shall be blunted until every wicked people is destroyed. And you remember the trial of Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron. By judging them, God showed his holiness in the eyes of the people. And Eleazar and Itamar he confirmed for the covenant of an everlasting priesthood. And you exert yourselves and do not fear them. Oh, this is part of a speech that's going to be delivered by the high priest to get everybody, you know, ready for this final battle. Do not fear them, for their desire goes towards chaos and emptiness, and their support is without. There's a break. Do they know that from the God of Israel everything is and will be, in all that will happen eternally? Today is his appointed time to humiliate and to abase the prince of the dominion of evil. He sends everlasting aid to the lot of his covenant by the power of his majestic angel for the sway of Michael, in the blessing of God's lot, to exalt the sway of Michael above all the gods, and the dominion of Israel over all flesh. Justice will rejoice in the heights, and all the sons of his truth will have enjoyment in everlasting knowledge. And you, sons of his covenant, be strong in God's crucible until he shakes his hand and finishes his testings, his mysteries concerning your existence. Then after these words, the priests shall blow for them in order to... They're blowing trumpets, by the way. I should probably make that clear here. So in order to arrange the battalions of the line in columns shall deploy at the sound of the trumpets until each man is in his position. The priest shall blow a second call on the trumpets and signal for attack. When the infantrymen shall reach the side of the Kittim line at throwing distance, each man will take his weapon of war in his hand, and the priest shall blow the trumpets of the slain. The Levites and all the throngs with ram's horns shall blow the call for war. The infantrymen will stretch out their hand against the army of the Kittim. When the sound of the call ends, they shall start to cast down their slain. All the throng will stop with the sound of the call, but the priest shall continue blowing the trumpets of the slain, and the battle of the Kittim will be directed, and the troops of Belial will be defeated in front of them in the third lot. And then it kind of breaks off, but you see what's going on here, right? So this is the ultimate prediction about the end of the Romans. And of course, so lots of this stuff was written in the late first century BCE. I think some of it probably was written already in the first century CE. So we're decades away. We're decades away from the Jewish war.
Right.
And the people who read this text undoubtedly, on the eve of the Jewish war,
probably some of them were in it. Yeah.
They saw what was happening. They saw that the Romans were coming and encroaching on Jerusalem, and they're like, what are they thinking, right?
They're thinking it's being fulfilled. Yeah.
It's coming. It's about to happen.
One of the things that to me is so interesting about the War Scroll is, I think, the light that it can shed on Jesus and the early church's nonviolence, because I think a lot of modern scholarship has a tendency to read modern pacifism, a more principled, ideological stance on nonviolence, back onto the early church and see them as being principled nonviolent people in that same kind of way, where I think, famously the Qumran community, the Essenes, were nonviolent in the sense that they were quietistic. They removed themselves from society, and their solution wasn't like the Maccabees, who were, let's rise up and, fight against the enemy.
Exactly.
Their solution was the exact opposite. Let's withdraw. But it wasn't principled pacifism. It was apocalyptic pacifism. Mm-hmm. It was pacifism on a schedule.
They were violent in their heart.
It's just not the time yet. What we're doing is we're waiting on God to descend. We're waiting on God to bring the angels to usher in the Messianic age, where then we will be empowered and anointed to fight in the eschatological battle. And so it was all just they're just looking at their watches saying, it's not time yet, but when it is time, we are ready to fight. And I think when you read the Gospels and you read Jesus's sayings with that in mind, you get this picture of his pacifism, which, he is preaching this kind of interim ethic where you listen to his eschatological parables, and there's always this story about the landowner going away, and then when he comes back, and when he finds the wicked servants not doing it, what does he do? He's going to destroy those men. And in story after story after story, Jesus tells, when the Son of Man comes back with the angels, he is going to judge. He's going to sit on his throne. He's going to divide the nations, and he is going to send the wicked to Gehenna. And the violence of Jesus's eschatology is really, really apparent, and it shows that he wasn't this pacifist that I think a lot of scholars like John Dominic Crossan want to kind of paint him as, and that's one of the reasons why John Dominic Crossan doesn't like the apocalyptic emphasis that the Gospels have, is because apocalypses are inherently violent, and it's those violent fantasies that are offensive to our modern mindset. But the Qumran community and the War Scroll, I think, is really illuminating to the particular brand of nonviolence that that Jesus probably held.
Totally.
Two things real quick, Kip. We've had a lot of super chats since we started that we haven't addressed, but the second thing is my recent interview with Bart Ehrman on Revelation, the Apocalypse that I did. I asked him about this, does he see a difference between the Jesus of Revelation and Jesus in the Gospels? And he was like, oh yeah, big time. There's a big difference. But I was trying to get it out of him, and I don't think he saw what I was trying to say. Exactly what Matthew's saying here was
exactly.
I don't know. I mean, yes, I think there's a lot more upfront, open crap is going down, blood. The enemies are going to be, scorch earth anger toward the enemies of God. That was obvious. But he kind of said, yeah, well, Jesus isn't painted that way in the Gospels. And I'm like, but he's apocalyptic. He has the expectation of burning the wheat and the chaff, the sheep and the goat. There is
it's not Jesus meek and mild. The Gospels is not this completely different picture.
No, we're reading it through our churchy type of interpretation.
That's just it, right? I think so much of this, it's so hard for us to get out of our thoroughly apocalyptically conditioned worldview with regards to these things, that the expectation is, within when I was still a Christian, the expectation was that there was going to be a violent end. Yes, but it I don't have anything to do with that.
Right.
It doesn't involve me. It's besides what I can even control. But it comes out of this apocalypticism from early Judaism. But I think you're absolutely right in that we need to be really careful about how we're blunting. Yes, they were, it's exactly as Matthew put it. They were pacifistic only in the sense that it was because they were on the clock. In their heart, there's nothing more that these people wanted to see than dead Romans. That's what they all wanted. And just because they were smiling and they're, smiling and nodding, and turning the other cheek, it didn't change the fact that deep down, they just wanted to see dead Romans. But there was this part of the apocalyptic worldview is this recognition that you as an individual have absolutely no you have no real agency within the world. Virtually all of your own decisions and your character and your life has been plotted out beforehand. It's been charted, right? So you are God's got this plan and everything fits within it. In fact, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, there's a sermon also in the community rule called the Treatise of the Two Spirits, which illustrates this explicitly, that virtually everybody is either on this side or that side, and it's by design, and there's nothing you can do about it except work out your destiny.
Yeah, that's how it was when I was a Calvinist. In fact,
right,
it was
exactly.
I had already figured it out. It was already there was no changing what was determined from beginning to end. So it was about my behavior that I just needed to mimic and show that I was an elect by my behavior. And there were moments when I'd relapse. And that's where I bring this up about how my behavior, there was a struggle. Am I your child, God? Why did I slip up? Why am I stuck in addiction and things? And it gets really, it was a nightmare torture of wondering if I'm his son. There's all sorts of stuff. There's all sorts of mental hell I put myself through. Can we get through a few of these supers?
Can I plug a book?
Yep, plug it.
If you're interested, this is a book that I edited. It's a Brill book. I haven't looked, but you could probably get it for a free PDF somewhere. So this is the War Scroll, Violence, War, and Peace in the Dead Sea Scrolls and related literature. And this is a book of collected essays from a whole bunch of different scholars. And I'll just some of the essays in here. I think they're all pretty good. I'm a little biased because I helped to put this together.
I mean, I only killed myself doing it,
Yeah, that's it. So text, timing and terror, thematic thoughts on the War Scroll, by George J. Brooke. Writing a descriptive grammar. Oh, that's about syntax. You guys probably aren't interested in that. The Mysteries of God in the Qumran War Scroll by Anthony Meyer. My article is not interesting to anybody. Priestly Covenants in the War Scroll and 1QSB, War Rule Texts and a New Theory of the People of the Dead Sea Scrolls by Robert Kugler. Violent Imaginaries and Practical Violence in the War Scroll by Alex P. Jason. The Naval Battle in the Qumran War Texts by Brian Schultz. Wisdom, Poverty, and Nonviolence in Instruction. It's loaded with all sorts of good stuff. Prophecy, False Prophecy, and War in the Dead Sea Scrolls by James E. Boley. So if you can get it, I think it's a great book. Nice. So it's a Brill book, unfortunately.
Are you wanting to read something quick before we get moving? Okay. So sure. I just think it's interesting.
I saw this super chat, and so I'm waiting on that.
Oh, this here? Okay, well, let's start. Let's start having some fun, because the chat is probably wanting to tune in. Feel free to super chat if you want to tune in with us. Mr. Monster says, let's talk about prophecies in Daniel. They are fun.
Yeah, well, this is what I was hoping to get at in talking about the Habakkuk Pesher too, because in the same way that the Habakkuk Pesher is inspired by specifically Habakkuk 2 and how Habakkuk 2 speaks of an appointed time of the end and has this emphasis on a foreordained time of prophetic fulfillment that inspires them to become more deterministic in their thinking about, this is about our time. It's appointed in God's foreknowledge. It's going to happen. But then also in Habakkuk 2, how it says, though it appears to delay, wait for it, and has a kind of a room for there being a time where, we thought that it was going to happen. It didn't happen. And there is this delay, this apparent delay. And the way that Habakkuk says, though it seems to delay, wait for it because it will come at the appointed time. The authors of the Habakkuk Pesher are inspired by that because they find in the prophetic tradition, on the voice of God, a justification for their own time of eschatological delay, and that strengthens their hearts in order to say, see, this experience of dissonance that we're having in this time of non-fulfillment was actually, it's a part of the plan all along. God had this in mind, and he wrote about it. He told Habakkuk about it. Habakkuk had this understanding that there would be this period of partial fulfillment, but still we're waiting. There's a delay, and it's all a part of God's plan. And so it kind of envelops their own time of anxiety, of eschatological anxiety, within this broader understanding of God's sovereignty, and that it's nothing to see here. It's all according to plan.
Well,
Daniel,
this is just, go ahead. Sorry.
No, well, Daniel does the same thing. Daniel, in the same way that the Habakkuk Pesher is inspired by Habakkuk to make that claim about God's foreordained purpose, and the delay is just an apparent delay. In Daniel 8, which is the first place where Daniel actually, and it's, as far as I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, Daniel is the only place where we get a specific prediction of time, where it's, you give the exact days in a Jewish apocalypse.
Yeah, I think so.
And they actually make an attempt at saying it's going to be this many days until the fulfillment of God's promises. But the first place in Daniel where that comes is in Daniel 8, and it's counting from when Antiochus Epiphanes took the daily sacrifices and offerings away from the temple, and they could no longer offer sacrifices. And so it says, from the time when the daily sacrifices are taken away, it says that there will be 2,300 evenings and mornings until, and it says the appointed time will come. And it's actually echoing Habakkuk about that emphasis on the appointed time. But the 2,300 evenings and mornings is when the sacrifices would be made in the temple in the evening and in the morning. And so it's 1,150 days. It's 1,150 days that it's counting. And that's the first prediction it makes. It was 1,150 days. Obviously that number is different from then in
1280
later in Daniel 11 and 12, you have 1,260 and then 1,290, and the 1,260, I mean, you're already, you've got 100 days more. All of these can be more or less 3.5 years. You can say, I mean, time times and half a time is the general time frame that Daniel gives, where it's in Daniel 9, you have 70 times 7 or 490 years. And the main focus is on the time after the daily sacrifices are taken away, after there's the abomination of desolation set up in the temple. And then there's this time times and half a time. And so it seems like the author tries to make that time times and half a time more specific at several points throughout the text. And the first time is in Daniel 8, where he says it's 1,150 days. Then he says in Daniel 11 or Daniel 12, 1,260. And then he says, but blessed are those who wait and come to the end of
1335, isn't it?
1,335 days. So adds 45 days to the second prediction of time. And that blessed are those who wait. John Collins points this out in his
Hermenea,
it's commentary,
gold standard commentary right here, best commentary on Daniel, points out that, again, as in Daniel 8, Daniel is echoing Habakkuk and saying, blessed is he who wait. It's Habakkuk 2 when it says, what's the exact phrase that Habakkuk says is that, speaks of those who wait. The righteous will live by their faith, but it's those
right.
who wait. And there's this emphasis on waiting and being patient in the midst of the apparent delay. And it's only an apparent delay. The time is appointed, but there's an apparent delay. And so it seems like Daniel, the author of Daniel, sitting in this time where he had made a specific prediction, a specific amount of days, those days pass. And some critics of the explanation that the author of Daniel is just adding then another extra is, well, why would he just tag on another amount of days instead of getting his eraser out, erasing the previous prediction and saying, oh no, this is the amount of days I said all along. The reason is found in his exegesis, in his use of Habakkuk. There's an apparent delay, and he is inspired by Habakkuk to say, this apparent delay sits within the purview of God's perfect plan, just as the authors of the Habakkuk Pesher did. And they said, no, this is a test of our faith.
Yeah. We
We are called to wait, and blessed are those who will wait and come to the end of this time of apparent delay. And so it's all he is justifying his previous prediction, saying it wasn't wrong. It's just that there's an apparent delay here, and the time has been extended a little bit. And so we have to be patient and wait, just like Habakkuk said.
Yep.
I'll tell you what, Daniel's a fun one. Seth Heideck says, I want a historical Borat. And then Seth says, how can you not like a guy send to bears to attack children for calling him bald? And then Seth
Hey, I gotta say, yeah. Oh, I didn't mention Elijah there anywhere or Elisha, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
James, brother
That's fine.
Jesus as Tiekshare of righteousness.
Teacher of righteousness.
Teacher. Okay. Sorry.
Cognitive dissonance after he was tossed down the stairs. No.
I don't think that's. That's.
I
not
mean,
the angle.
it's so late. It's so late. You have to basically shift. I know there are some pockets where it's popular to try and shift the entire Jesus movement back a couple hundred years, but yeah, you just can't do it. And that's what you would have to do in order to make any sense of
Teacher of righteousness.
Teacher of righteousness in line with James.
Thank you, Lebowski.
Thank you.
Jefferson. Appreciate you, Lebowski. Ichapod. Dude, this is a good one right here. What's up, team? Derek, please treat Matthew to a coffee on me. His video on cognitive dissonance explaining Christianity was fire.
Thank you.
Go subscribe to Ichapod. I'm telling you, he's doing some great stuff. He's been showing up everywhere. I'm like hoping that more people will get involved in the community. I seriously appreciate everybody here in the chat today. Brady Goodwin. So you know the rapper, the hip hop Christian artist. That's Ichapod.
Wow.
Oh, is it? Is it Ichapod or is it Ichabod? When I see that, I wanna think
it's Ichapod.
The Greek pronunciation on that.
Yeah, you remember? It might be Ichabod, but you remember?
It reminds me of Ichabod,
Armies of Darkness, where he had to remember 3 words, and he gets to the end and he forgot one of them, and he's like, Shadrach, Meshach. I said your words. He didn't remember. I don't know. Ichapod, Ichabod. I don't know. Ichabod. You know, it's a pod. Okay, it's a potty. Subscribe to him for sure. MNAG in the house. Just here putting my support in something important. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Very important. Really Thank you.
Seriously appreciate that support. We're giving it to the Apocalyptic Feld Funding Foundation that we just created today. I don't know how to pronounce this name, but they became a member.
Guts. Yeah.
Wainreich. Dude, killer name. You just became a member. Thank you for that. Seriously appreciate your support and being a member.
I want to just say one more thing about Daniel while we're still on that previous chat, but just talking again about the drama of the way that the biblical tradition reinterprets previous prophecies. We were talking about Jeremiah and how Jeremiah reinterprets, he updates Micah, where Micah had an unconditional prophecy of judgment. And then Jeremiah reinterprets that to be conditional. Well, then Jeremiah makes this prediction about 70 years until the time of restoration, until the end of exile. And then Daniel takes Jeremiah, reinterprets him through Daniel's deterministic apocalyptic framework, where Jeremiah was conditional. Daniel is very deterministic, but reinterprets Jeremiah so that it's not 70 years. It's
70 times.
The angel Gabriel reveals to him, actually, that speaks of 70 times 7. And then Jesus in the Olivet Discourse says, actually, the abomination of desolation. Daniel was about the Seleucids. I mean, it was about the Romans. Antiochus Epiphanes and the Seleucids, and Jesus and Baruch and other apocalypses in the first century reinterpret Daniel so that it's now about the Romans.
Yeah.
And it's about their time. And it just keeps going and going and going.
One of the things that we see in the Dead Sea Scrolls is a number of texts which have latched onto this 490 years of Daniel. But what they're doing is they're attempting to provide different calculations on how to divide it up, how to understand what happens within that 490 year period. And you've probably got, I don't know the wall, but I think you've probably got about as many as 5 different ways of calculating and parting up this 490 year period, depending on the text you're reading, and all just in this one place, right?
Yep.
So I mean, so much of this stuff I think is it's so flexible, it's so malleable, and the people who read this literature were just like creative kind of literary geniuses.
Yep. That's why earlier I was getting up, Kip, and I was looking. I had this like spark of interest in finding John J. Collins' book, Apocalyptic Imagination, because he has a chart in that book. Like, kind of checks off all this different literature. No, it's somewhere, dude.
I've got my copy over here.
Do you? You want to grab it real quick? All right, you guys are getting the shindig here. This is the skinny. You're on the front row seat, seeing the good stuff. But there's a spot in there where he specifically, I think it's the Habakkuk Pesher, that actually is doing this 490-year thing. I'll have to double check. Yeah, they're using the Daniel thing as well. So they're like doing all sorts of stuff. They're a blender of ideas.
So 2 things. First, this one, highly recommended.
Back it up a little bit. I think that's better. You can see that, right?
Apocalypticism and the Dead Sea Scrolls. Excellent stuff. Goes into the Habakkuk Pesher a lot in there and relates it to the book of Daniel. But then Apocalyptic Imagination, I think I have an earlier copy than your edition, probably.
Yeah, mine's the black cover.
Yeah, you got the newer one. I've got the
Which one does
only good
have?
people get the new
one?
Oh,
see, that's the one that I have, but I was just looking at my bookshelf now, and I believe that is another book that is still in Norway.
I'm going to do something here temporarily. Forgive me for butchering here. We're going to try and set this thing up. All right, let's see if we can get... So this chart in here, you can't even see the words, but in fact, let me get up in there. So he goes in, like, checks off like all the criteria that these particular manuscripts cover. And you can pause this later if you're watching this after it's live and actually read these. Or you can just be smart, and buy the book. That's an option too. But I might as well let me get you. Rather have your face in clear because I just scoot to your distance and then we're good. Yeah. All right, that's better. So in this section, you highlighted the hizzy out of this thing. So there's some really good stuff here. I don't think he has Habakkuk Pesher's not in that list on the chart, but in this section, dude, it's been a year since I read this. Somewhere in the section, he brings up the 490 years, and it's related to this Habakkuk Pesher and its failed apocalyptic expectation. And it's just a blurb. Like, it's like 2 paragraphs, but it's like dense. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a killer. Because it fits right into this Daniel's failed apocalyptic expectation. I mean, they thought it was going to happen in their time. And one comment on that, just one comment. I'm popping up the next super chat so we don't get rabbit trailing here and forget that we're trying to make sure everybody's happy. Look, the reason this is a problem today of addressing this issue is that, well, we don't have Essenes like a continuation of this movement standing up trying to defend themselves and go, no, the teacher of righteousness was correct. In fact, it did get fulfilled in all the words he said, yada, yada, yada. Christianity is still like an active living organism that is like really holding and maintaining to this literature. So when we're poking holes at the beehive, the hornets are going to come out and they're going to try and sting you. It's a living thing still. Does that make sense? So it's very sacred. It's very special. Don't touch this. This is why I continuously say special pleading, this and that. And it's like the one Christians that we do hear that come on who are being called not Christians by other Christians, by the way, such as Jonathan McClatchy calling Dale C. Allison Jr. a not Christian on Twitter. Right. Like, yeah, get a Christian to tell you. They'll tell you who the non-Christians are in no time. But he admits, they were wrong about that. Yeah. Those are predictions about the soon near. They were wrong about that. You got to have a lot of respect for people who do that, no matter what they believe at the end of the day, because that guy is like taking a strong stance on something that really is sensitive and tough for your faith.
Yep.
And the ones who act like there's nothing going on here, Christianity does not fail, there's no failed apocalyptic stuff, Jesus was right on everything he said, and Paul was right on everything he said. I imagine if the Essenes were still living and there was still a community going, they would say the same thing. Kind of like Orthodox Jews say, there were no failed prophecies in the Hebrew scriptures.
Yeah.
They go along with the conditionality if they can. They go along with whatever they can to make sure it's not failed, the same way I see Christians. So I just wanted to make that comment if that's something you guys wanted to add something to.
No, that's good.
Not to that specifically. I wanted to read another text here, just as an example of here. This is an example. This is from a manuscript cataloged as 4Q390. It's one of the manuscripts that I did my. It's been called a copy of an apocryphon of Jeremiah. I'm not really. I don't particularly like that title because I don't actually think it has anything to do with Jeremiah. Although it's based on another text that has something to do with Jeremiah. But this is an example of one way in which one of these Dead Sea Scrolls manuscripts was thinking through this idea of 490 years. So this is reading from fragment 1. I will turn and deliver them into the hand of the sons of Aaron for 70 years. And the sons of Aaron will rule over them, and they will not conduct themselves in my way, which I am prescribing for you, that you may warn them. But they will also do what is evil in my eyes, like everything that Israel did in the days of their former kingdom. Sorry, this is my...
That's a jab at the priests.
Yeah, exactly. Well, specific priests, right?
Right, of course.
So... except for those who go up first from the land of their captivity to build the sanctuary. Unto them shall I speak, and I will send unto them commandments, and they will understand everything that they and their fathers abandoned. Then from the completion of that generation, in the 7th Jubilee, after the devastation of the land, they will forget statute, season, Sabbath, and covenant, and they will invalidate everything and will do what is evil in my eyes. So I will hide my face from them and will deliver them into the hands of their enemies, and I will surrender them to the sword, and I will let survive from them fugitives or a remnant, so that they may not be completely destroyed by my wrath when my face is hidden from them, and the angels of the Mastamot will rule over them, and I will reject them, and they will return to do that which is evil in my eyes and walk about in stubbornness of heart. So that's just an example of the way. There's one way in which someone is taking this 490-year period, and then they're mapping it out, but then assigning periods of time within there to correspond to stuff that's happening in Jewish history from the time of Nebuchadnezzar, basically up to their current time or their expectant immediate future time, right? And then, of course, you can lodge all your own complaints about specific groups and specific people, like the Bnei Acharon, the sons of Aaron, who were sacrificing in the temple. Right. Wow. Distinct from us, of course, the good guys. So, but that's just one example. There's others.
Shangfa Shi, thank you for that super chat. That's very interesting about Satan. I've learned that wasn't a name, but rather an office within the Council of the Gods. If that's the case, how many different characters occupied that office?
Well, let's see. We're currently occupying the office.
Right.
So who are the guys after us?
Listen, I can't even remember. Well, we won that election by stealing it, so that's what we do.
So, how many different characters occupy? Is this person asking how many different characters occupy the office of the Satan, the accuser?
I suspect. I mean, you've got Belial, you've got like Azazel, like various demonic names and stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
the evolution that takes place where, like in texts like Job, the Satan is not an enemy of God. He is a part of God's heavenly court, and he has an official occupation, which is to, like the lawyer in the court bringing evidence against people, he is accusing people to God so that God would act against them. But there is that evolution that takes place.
Thank you
Yeah,
for that. JR, thank you for the super chat, my friend. Usual. The Hebrew Israelites sure do embrace the Jesus of Revelation.
Which is the Jesus of the Gospels, too.
That's the thing, right? I think Bart was kind of trying to separate a little bit of what we're seeing, and I'm thinking maybe this one's just a little more upfront about what he's trying to accomplish, whereas the other one is not clear because I think the churchy interpretation model we've been living with. Yeah,
I think there's something else I think is worth saying here with regards to perspectives of violence within apocalyptic imagery and apocalyptic texts. One of the things that scholars tend to do is they'll look at a lot of this apocalyptic literature and read within them or reconstruct as a result of what they're seeing, conditions of what's happening at the time to prompt this kind of stuff. And invariably what we tend to think is that apocalyptic literature is all a product of persecution. People are going through a really shitty time, which prompts this heightened expectation for change and for the end, and escalates these feelings of resentment and hatred and otherness. When I have taught introduction to the Old Testament before, and something that I used to do when it came to teaching, going through the Psalms and centering on what scholars like to call the imprecatory Psalms, which are the really, really violent ones that talk about how much they want to see Babylonian babies' heads smashed against rocks and their enemies, utterly destroyed. One of the things that I like to do is show a clip from the movie that Michael Moore made back in how long ago was this now? Fahrenheit 9/11. I think that's got to be 20 years old by now. And I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's a documentary of sorts about the Bush presidency and the Iraq War. And there's this really harrowing scene in there of like a group of American soldiers who have just fought a battle or had an engagement with some people in like a residential neighborhood in Iraq, and of course ended up destroying all sorts of private property and killing civilians and all these so-called instances of collateral damage. And there's a woman who is screaming out to Allah in this amazing scene, just screaming out to him, how badly she deserves justice and how much she wants Allah to come down and to destroy the Americans and to cut their limbs off and to disembowel them. And she is in the heart of it, after having just seen her entire family or her friends or neighbors cut down by soldiers, has this visceral emotive reaction through which she expresses these fantasies of violence, right? And that's what so much of this is a product of this kind of world where these people saw and lived through like horrible things, atrocities and persecution and oppression that none of us can even imagine, which prompted the production of this kind of very, very strong, violent language and imagery. I just thought that was important to point out.
Yeah, you got him, and his curiosity is popping off.
So, excellent book, another one by John Collins, called Apocalypse, Prophecy, and Pseudepigraphy. And there's a chapter in there, chapter 18. The title is Cognitive Dissonance and Eschatological Violence, Fantasized Solutions to a Theological Dilemma in Second Temple Judaism.
Yeah.
The whole chapter is talking about the dissonance that Jews were living with in believing that their God is the creator, sustainer of the universe, and that they are his special chosen people, and that he has promised them blessing. He has promised that they would be the head and not the tail, and yet they are living in a situation of occupation. They are living in a situation of persecution, and that this is the context in which apocalyptic fantasies of violence emerge, because they are trying to respond to that dissonance, the chasm between their belief in the one God who is good, who is all powerful, and who has chosen us to be a blessing to the whole world, and yet the situation of destitution and of persecution and of lowliness that we find ourselves in continually, and that it's easy often to judge those kinds of apocalyptic fantasies of violence, but Collins does a really good job at describing and empathizing with that experience of felt persecution, and showing how if you're in that situation, this sometimes feels, when you're in a situation of powerlessness, this is the only way that you can find release. You have all this built up pressure. And of course, the belief is the problem. I mean, the belief that you are serving the one God that controls what's happening right all that's now. Happening. That is what's creating that.
My best friend controls the universe. Yeah.
That's why you need to find an explanation. But either way, that experience is going to be rough. And those fantasies of violence are, a way for them to release that built up pressure, without resorting to, an ill-advised violence now.
And you see that ill-advised go full-fledged with rebellions that end up getting squashed like bugs by Rome. It's pretty intense. Imnag, thank you for the super chat. As this channel picks up popularity, fundamentalists will come after you guys full force. Any thoughts on how prepared you are? I believe it's already started. Any concerns? They can get very vile. I
do this for fun. And I mean, this is just, I'm a hobbyist, and I really am not. I mean, this guy, you've got a thick skin you've built up over the years where you're used to all that stuff. I don't enjoy that kind of stuff. And for me, it's just, I'm fascinated with the subject itself. And so as long as I can just keep my mind focused on the fun of it, then I'll keep going. And I try, and I'm not the best at it, but I try to ignore the negativity as much as possible and just do what I'm doing.
Oh, so the solution, I would say, is what I'm going to get good at, and more over time you're going to notice, is becoming someone who ignores and blocks. Because what I'm doing right now, because I'm on a friendly basis with most people who, disagree with me at the end of the day, the goal is to try and keep decent relationships with people. If I find that it's getting heated or out of control or too much, or there is kind of like just throwing people under the bus, at some point you got to go, all right, enough. Even the Dalai Lama, after getting bit for the third time by a mosquito, killed the mosquito. Okay. They don't take life at all. They're supposed to not, at least. He said strike 3. That's it. My point is if it keeps coming, block and move, block and keep going. Because what I'm going to do isn't going to stop. We are educating And if someone who is sincere, wanting to investigate and figure out what the case is, historically, you've come to the right place. If you want to know what your Protestant packaged deal offers you, go check out some Protestant Christian channel or Eastern Orthodox channel or Roman Catholic channel. Like, we are coming at this with historical methodology. We're not interested in drawing a conclusion in particular on any of this stuff. Yes, we have our bias. Yes, I have my conclusions, but it's more of a historical research channel. Sometimes I sprinkle in my anti-apologetic stuff, but it's majority not that. It's mostly what is the case and deal with the data. And I have Christian scholars who come on and they set that standard pretty good too. So it's like, hey, dude, if I can get Christian scholars to come on, maybe Christians should follow suit with Christian academics, not necessarily their apologetic ones. Anyway, that's my thoughts, Imnag. I really appreciate the super chat. And, you know, Kip, even the other day, you kind of corrected me, and I didn't really let you know that I reciprocated that. You were like, no, your channel isn't anti-apologetics. Yes, you do that kind of stuff, but like you mostly are interested in historical inquiry and like what is the history of stuff? Like what's the case on things? And that is my goal. And I think the less I do that, I'll sleep better at night too. Yep. JR's back again. This had nothing to do with the Romans. This war scroll was from the time of Melchizedek and Abraham.
Nope. Sorry. Yeah, no, it wasn't.
I'm wondering where that thought comes from.
Yeah.
Like what would be the evidence or justification for that?
Well, think about it this way too. I imagine Orthodox Jews will like argue that they have some type of genealogical line all the way to David. I think Rabbi Singer thinks that he's either connected to Aaron or David or something. There's no way to genealogically prove it, but there's something about carrying that. Well, no, we have a lineage that goes all the way back. And I wonder if this literature is sacred to JR. And they're going, no, I believe it goes back to Melchizedek. You might have hard copies of what we know from the 1st, 2nd century BCE. But I think this goes back to Abraham or Melchizedek. But as far as data or evidence, there's none to prove or show that.
Yeah. So, I mean, the way that we do this, the way that scholars do this is like, I start with what we have, which are manuscripts. In the case of the War Scroll, we've got copies from as early as like 50 BCE to as late as maybe 30 or 40 CE. And then we look at conventions within the text too. If you can gain any sort of internal historical insight on the basis of what an author is writing, that's always really helpful. One of the things that scholars look at in something like the War Scroll, so I believe it's Jean Duhem has pointed out that lots of the structure of the descriptions of the eschatological battle within the War Scroll align with pockets of things that we see in 1st and 2nd Maccabees. And then someone else has pointed out that the war rules themselves and the way that that it talks about arranging yourself for battle, the kinds of formations that you take in fighting this war, actually looks very close to Hellenistic Greek war texts. So I mean, there's all these little pieces.
Doesn't it refer explicitly to the Kittim?
It refers explicitly to the Kittim as well. I mean, consistently throughout the text. Of course, the Kittim are mentioned in the Book of Numbers.
Yeah, but I found that,
and again,
That's what I was going to ask you. Is like, didn't later on, oftentimes Jews would find in kind of the family tree of Noah, or find within the nations that are described, and they would attribute them to contemporary nations that they had. Like, so they kept reapplying biblical terms to these things. So,
yeah. So, but all that to say is there's a combination of things that we're looking very carefully at in an effort to provide as clear a picture as we can of when a text was written or why it was written, without just accepting on the face of it everything that the text says for itself, because authors all write from these agendaed perspectives. We can't help it. So this is kind of what we do, and this is with regards to the War Scroll. This is where we've ended up. So I'm afraid it just doesn't work to see it coming out of the Bronze Age. Christine
Elise, Alice, forgive me if I butchered your name. Thank you for the super chat. I didn't see a comment, but I didn't want to leave you hanging, or question or something like that. Really appreciate the support, and I seriously thank you for that. Vesper, are there any other forged prophecies like Daniel?
I don't like the word forged, because I think it provides an anachronistic sense of intellectual property on texts and traditions which didn't function with the same sort of values in place. In fact, I mean, this was a common convention within early Judaism, certainly, was to ascribe, if you had something really important to say, then you needed to ascribe it to somebody who was bigger and better than you were. So this is
more often than not, the apocalypses were pseudepigraphy in that way, right? They
almost all of them. Yeah.
Enoch, or
the Book of Jubilees, was written by angels with the plates up in heaven. Or so this isn't an apocalyptic text, but my favorite is the ultimate mic drop of authority. Sorry, I didn't. The ultimate mic drop of authority has to be the Temple Scroll, which claims to have literally been written by Yahweh in the first person. So this is it's a writing convention. As for but that's what we're there's lots of this kind of stuff. The text that I read from a little bit earlier was been called the Apocryphon of Jeremiah, because it's been it's part of a collection of literature featuring the prophet Jeremiah, in a position very similar to Daniel, where he's doing the same thing, right? He's expounding prophecies about what's going to happen, in the future. Of course, he's writing from the time of, like, the eve, or in the Apocryphon of Jeremiah, actually, he's writing from Tophanes, which is where he was kidnapped and taken after the destruction of Jerusalem, the final destruction in 587. He was taken to Egypt, and this is where he speaks this long prophecy about everything that's going to take place, talking about the Persians and about the Greeks and about the Hasmoneans. So I mean, it's very, very common, but we shouldn't call these things forgeries. It was a popular common convention of writing in antiquity.
Thank you so much for that. Margaret de Velden in the house. Good to see you, Margaret. Haven't seen you in a minute. Christianity changed from mainly Jews to mainly Gentiles, so the Roman hate, Katim, should have faded. Comments? Thanks, and love these sessions.
Yeah.
I think so. I think the renegotiation or reinterpretation of Revelation, for example, became like, and then eventually notice like Athanasius and Eusebius and like Irenaeus even thought it was about his time because the Romans were put one of his people to death in the arena. The emperor at the time was being told by one of their guys was like, hey, we can't afford these gladiators, like, but we can afford criminals that are breaking our laws. And these Christians over here, they're breaking our laws, not listening to what we say about obeying, not speaking in public places, whatever it might be. And so they're taking Christians, throwing them in the arena. Now, of course, we get the side of the Christians saying, oh, poor us. Now, yes, poor them for sure over silly law like that. But the point is, like, they put themselves in the predicament oftentimes. They weren't always hunted down. Myth of Persecution, Candida Moss, go read the book. Anyway, and then there were bad times. I'm not trying to say it was all like that. But yeah, the idea that going from like hate the Romans to hold on, we're all Romans now, what the heck, to actually the book of Revelation is an allegory and like symbolic. Athanasius starts talking about, and later on, the Protestants start to realize it's actually the Catholic Church. So it gets used all over again and it keeps working. So the interpretation is quite interesting.
Well, and you can see this progression specifically of the antipathy toward Rome that kind of fades away. If you just read the Gospels chronologically from, Mark being the first gospel to Matthew to Luke to John, you can see a progression in the trial narratives, the passion narratives, in the portrayal of Pilate. Pilate is portrayed much more negatively in Mark, the earliest gospel, than he is in John, the latest gospel. And you can see that progression pretty clearly where Pilate gets whitewashed and the bad guys become more and more the leadership of Jerusalem, not the Romans.
Yeah. Keep them off our backs. Margaret, thank you for showing up, and it's great to see you here, seriously. JB has a good one. It's big time cognitive dissonance when you're singing praise songs to God, hallelujah, 1 minute, and wondering if he will fry you forever the next. Cracks developing, though. This failed prophecy thing has legs.
Yeah. The reason why, I as right as Matthew is about this, it's unfortunate that I don't see a solution here, because one of the remarkable things about prophetic literature is just how malleable it usually is. So even though prophecies fail, and this is a big part of what Carroll is writing in his book too, right? They're never going to fade, because as they fail, you can just find new ways to understand them and reapply them. This is something I noticed myself with regards to the literature at Qumran. They tend to be quite specific, but not so specific.
Yep.
And I think that's a design feature.
Yep.
And part of that is this. I think there's this. I don't know if it's explicit, but it's kind of a way of ensuring the permanence of these texts, right? Once it fails, there's still an element within there that you can recycle and then just reapply to something new. So
I mean, look at not even the Son of Man knows the day or hour. Just before that, he says, here's the season.
Yeah.
Here are the signs. This generation will not pass, but I don't really know the day or hour. And what do we get to focus on? Particular Christians who still hold on to these expectations will say, well, he didn't know the day or hour, and he could be talking about today. And it's like,
use
dude,
that to invalidate everything he said.
Everything he said before. Like, what are you in the same? Are you reading English with me here? Like, we're not reading the same book or something. Like, what happened? And so there's like, if they find a weak spot, a wiggle room, a place that gives them the chance. And like you said, you're thinking it'll stay alive as long as that's an option. JR came back, says, we do have the Yahad still living today. They are still at war with the rabbis, sort of.
Amazing. Oh, I don't know anything about that.
And then JR said, Bilal has them brainwashed, and the Yahad still fights to wake the nation of Israel.
Wow.
Wow. I don't have much more to say, but wow.
And then Alan Bird says, recently learned that Urban II and the First Crusade was based on apocalyptic ideas. The book Armies of Heaven by J. Rubinstein is a good intro.
Interesting. I haven't read that one.
I haven't either.
Yeah, I don't know that either.
Huh.
Oh, but that's cool.
That is. Wayne Rossi says, are the characters who undergo apotheosis understood to have joined the Council of the Gods? Are the other accounts of apotheosis than Enoch? Are there other accounts of apotheosis than Enoch, Elijah?
Within the Christian tradition, within the Jewish tradition.
I imagine Jewish.
So there's actually, I don't know if so I don't know if we can say that they are understood to have joined the Council of the Gods, because I think where the apotheosis starts to I guess form out of this ancient Israelite religion, people need to understand that like many of the traditions within the Hebrew Bible, while they come from the Israelite religions of the Iron Age, have been heavily redacted and reshaped and revised during the post-exilic period, during which Judaism actually emerged as like this new diasporic expression of the old religion, with the new Second Temple, but now with also these new communities of Jews living, in Alexandria and Babylon and all over the place. So what we're talking about with something like Enoch, who walked with God and then was no more, you've got this whole tradition developing in the Second Temple period. Traces as far back maybe as the time of Alexander, but probably not even quite that far. This idea of him becoming like a divine figure, and so this is a product of this much later worldview, which no longer has the same kind of sense of a Canaanite pantheon that we see expressed in views about the Council of the Gods or the Council of God, appearing in various places within the Hebrew Bible traditions. And I will say, while he's not a figure who was directly apotheosized, is that a word?
Yeah, I guess. I know what you mean.
But so we do have other examples of figures, who live in heaven, in the Second Temple period. Famously, Moses is there with Elijah and Jesus at the Transfiguration. In Second Maccabees, chapter 15. I think it's chapter 15. Judas Maccabeus is given a sword by the prophet Jeremiah. He actually like hands it to him from out of heaven,
Right.
in order to to help him defeat Nicanor. And so we have examples of this kind of thing, this idea of a um, figures from the history, heroes of the Jewish faith, functioning in this cosmic realm. But I don't think you can I don't think you can map that back onto like the old ideas about the divine council.
Right. Digital Hammurabi in the house. Dr. Josh says, MythVision, why do you continually have fraud scholars on your channel? Embarrassing
Wondering
atheists.
the same thing.
Yeah, cognitive dissonance. We've been talking. How do you not know this by now? I mean, I'm literally trying to make sense of why I'm suppressing the truth and unrighteousness and want to live in sin. This is the reason. And you know that. You know why I don't want those true scholars on my channel. You know why.
I'm here because I hate Jesus.
So right. Someone's going to clip that. Someone clip that and put that on something right there. I'm here, and put that in a remix. I'm here because I hate Jesus. I'm here because I hate Jesus. Oh my gosh.
Oh God. My mother's gonna see that and she's gonna disown me all over again.
Oh my gosh. Well, Josh, I'm inviting you next week on the channel, and I'm going to keep the consistency of scholars I have on the channel. So you're welcome to come and join me.
The shit scholars, the shit fraud scholars. Yeah.
Yeah, those fraud scholars. JR says, Katim, city of Cyprus, sons of Belial.
Sons of Belial.
Belial. Yeah. Thank you so much for JR.
Hey, the Belial is actually a play on words, eh? So this term Belial comes out of 1 Samuel, and it's applied to the sons of Eli. Eli is the priest at Shiloh. He's got these rotten sons who are, they're enriching themselves out of the sacrifices being offered at the shrine, and they're also having sex with the women serving in the shrine there. So they're really bad. And the text actually says, it calls the B'nai Eli Belial. So it's and when you see it written in Hebrew, it's actually it looks like it looks like a play on words. It says the B'nai Eli were the B'nai Belial. So that's fun. I think.
Actually, I'm letting everybody know you can vote right now in the chat. Press 1 if you like our fraud scholars, please. You have an opportunity now to participate.
If you don't, should you press 2 or any other number? Any other number. If you don't like the fraud scholars.
There's only one option.
Or how does this work, Derek? If not everybody is pressing one, then does that fuck up the algorithm, or should everybody press?
Honestly, they can press 2 or 3 if they also do like my fraud scholars. So almost any number if they like our fraud scholars, but if they don't like our fraud scholars, they can also type any number in right now. So vote whatever number is subjectively true to you right now, and then I will have my mind reading capabilities let me know who's for the guy and who's not.
What number should they press if they hate Jesus?
You know what? I'll let you determine that, because you have a way of knowing. You have a sense of omniscience in your thinking here. So I trust you. I trust you with your atheist powers. It's pretty clear. I've seen you do some things.
Okay.
Hangfa Shy. I always feel like I'm butchering 90% of the people's names. Forgive me, but they probably love super chatting so they can hear me say "forgive me." That's very telling that you would structure their what is it?
Is that
They would
millennial
structure their
strategies?
Millennial strategies, probably.
Okay.
I
Along
think.
contemporary Greek ideas.
Oh, military strategies along
Oh,
contemporary
yeah.
strategies. He's talking about the War Scroll here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
along
absolutely.
Greek ideas. This strengthens the idea that idea this is all man-made. I could believe it if they imagined heaven's weapons or something.
Yeah, no,
Interesting.
it's true. So I mean, this is we write what we know.
Right. Well, the next one's Vesper says, I mean, are there other texts written after events? So when he said forged, I think what Vesper was trying to say is like ex eventu, right? And yes, there's several pieces of literature that act as though something is fulfilled. And we have good internal and external clues, oftentimes depending on the text, on this was written well after, and they're acting like it's happening or it's in their future.
So John, that if you take a screenshot of that that you shared earlier,
you gotta hold it up to the camera.
That chart he has.
It's the same one.
Okay. He has the otherworldly journey apocalypses and then the historical apocalypses. And of the historical apocalypses that he lists are Apocalypse of Abraham, Second Baruch, Fourth Ezra, Jubilees, Apocalypse of Weeks, Animal Apocalypse, and Daniel. And on the ex eventu question, are they written after the fact, post dating their prophecies? Every single one is ex eventu. Every single one is post dating their prophecies.
And this is not and this is not even something that's restricted to like the Second Temple period, like the post exilic stuff. This is in the Bible too. The little apocalypse, which is in the book of Isaiah, is sort of it's thought by a lot of scholars to be like a very early sort of form of this. You can see some of that in there, but I particularly like 1 Kings chapter 13. I think that's right. I think it's 1 Kings chapter 13. There's a story of Jeroboam, who has taken control of established basically the northern kingdom. They've separated from the Davidic kingdom and set up their own place there in Samaria, and he erects these shrines at Dan and Bethel, so the people, don't have to go all the way back into enemy territory to Jerusalem to worship Yahweh. They can worship Yahweh, represented by a golden calf, of course, at either of these two shrines. And so he's at the shrine at Bethel, sacrificing to Yahweh, and the text just calls this guy a man of God, comes out and prophesies against Jeroboam and mentions to him how, in hundreds of years, Josiah is going to come and he's going to break down these altars and he's going to burn on them the human bones of the priests. And this is all going to take place hundreds of years from now. And of course, when this does happen, when Josiah does arrive at Bethel and sacrifices all of the priests of Yahweh there, he makes sure to take note of this prophecy that was uttered by the man of God, and instructs everybody that his place, his burial place, is still there, and we need to make sure that we look after it, don't disturb it, don't touch it. So it's
I think most of the literature, it works in this vein of like, it's either Kepa tradition, so you have second and third Isaiah, you have people later writing and then tacking on, acting like they're this guy in the past. The other interesting thing is, apart from just the literature, has archaeology buried the Bible? Israel Finkelstein and Silverman literally show like a lot of the sites that the Bible claims that Joshua's conquest happens and this and that happens and yada, yada, yada. There is no layer of archaeology before the 7th century BC in many of these sites, which what I'm saying, that means nothing ever happened at these places before the 7th century. The Bible writes them as if they're 12th century at the time of Moses and Joshua. No, they're 500 years later, and there is significant, in some of these cases, significant things happening, but they're happening in the 7th century, not in the 12th. So there's a lot of like anachronistic, like inserting narrative into the past by 500 years, but really this is stuff that's maybe happening in the current day.
Can I just
go for it?
No, I just wanted to say something about 2nd and 3rd Isaiah. Because I think it's important to point out that what's happening there is different. This is not ex eventu prophecy. These are, so what's taking place there is these are songs and poems and literature that's basically expressing the zeitgeist of the present day, which happens to be post-exilic or exilic and then post-exilic Judaism. But they're not written. These are not prophecies, and they're not written as if this is something that is being fulfilled now. So what happens though is, because this literature is appended onto the prophecy of Isaiah proper, over time it gets subsumed under this rubric of Isaiah, right? So even though this was never intentioned to be the kind of thing that we're talking about making prophetic fulfillment after the fact, it becomes that just by virtue of the association to this earlier literature, even though I don't believe there was ever anything of that intent in the writing of this stuff in the first place. I just wanted to say that.
Almost like compilers or redactors put it together and went, oh, this is Isaiah, but it may not have been.
Yeah, so somebody over time, as you're reading this text that has been put together, you start to think about the whole thing as Isaiah, when in actual fact it wasn't. And even at the time this stuff was written, I'm not even certain was intended to be Isaiah, right? It just it ended up that way.
Were you about to say something before we get to the
say something,
Matt. You guys had ever heard of George Washington's Valley Forge vision? You ever heard of George Washington's Valley Forge vision? So
I've heard of George Washington.
So George Washington had a vision at Valley Forge, at the Battle of Valley Forge, where he saw the outcome of the battle, and he saw, 100 years into the future, he saw the Civil War, and he saw what the outcome of the Civil War would be. And then he saw even farther than that. And the apocalyptic community that I was a part of, actually, in our prophetic history, we had George Washington's Valley Forge vision as a part of our story that was incorporated into our prophetic history.
Wow.
Go to Wikipedia and look up George Washington's Valley Forge vision. You'll read a whole bunch about it. But the thing is, it was written in a paper during the Civil War by I forget which side of the war the guy was supporting, but he was writing it basically as wartime propaganda for one side, and he was predicting the outcome. And I mean, he must have been, I guess, on the side of the Union of the North, because he got it right. He predicted the correct outcome of the war, and then
Cool.
And then charismatic Christians, century and a half later, are reading that and thinking this was actually a prophecy of George Washington, and then we reinterpreted it to then be looking even past that and looking at World War III coming just in the future, and to our future. And because then it predicted accurately all these things after George Washington's time, now we know it speaks accurately to our future. But that's an example. I mean, that is how exegesis prophecy works. It fully is exactly just like Daniel and Enoch and all the others. But it's a more modern example, and it's fascinating. When I realized that, because I believed it, I thought George Washington actually had this vision. And then coming out of that community, and I literally just read Wikipedia on that and found out, oh my God, like I found the paper that it was written in, who the guy who probably wrote it and all that. And it's just like, I cannot believe, like we just believed that this was true because it fit in with our worldview.
Thank you, someone. Prophecies never fail is because multi-generations could literally wait forever. Latest I heard, every year in the Bible is actually 50 Jubilee years. So this time the rapture will truly happen before 2023 or 2030, sorry.
Well, at least we'll live to see it, right?
Yeah, I'm hoping. Can't wait. Thank you, someone. DMG, does the Old Testament explicitly state what a Messiah is? The term seems vague, and it seems odd that Jews and Christians are awaiting someone with few, if any, recognizable attributes. Great chat.
So, now this is, I mean, the Messiah, Mashiach is a noun that just literally means anointed one, like one who's anointed, and it's always applied in the Old Testament. It's applied to kings and to priests, and I'm not sure if it's applied to a prophet, but this is I tend to think we see pockets of messianism emerging in some of the later texts in the Hebrew Bible in the Old Testament. Certainly in the book of Daniel, you see it in Zechariah's night visions. The second part of Zechariah, you see it in the book of Haggai. But interestingly, this term Mashiach is almost never applied in this period to this figure who's going to be the deliverer of the oppressed nation of Israel. There are other terms that are used to apply to him, usually something like the Son of David, or usually like the prophet or the priest. There's this expectation, right, of this figure. The term, I think, most famously applied to a figure of deliverance appears in Second Isaiah, where it speaks of Cyrus as the Messiah of God, and it calls him that because he's the one who has made it possible and issued this proclamation of release and nation building for not just the Jews, but for many people. But the Jews think they're special. So that's where it's first mentioned, and then we see this, but we do see this term picked up later in the post, probably more in like the Hellenistic and later period. So after 300, you see it then applied pretty frequently in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Two special figures. Quite often the Dead Sea Scrolls call the prophets Mashiachim. It's explicitly, I was on this channel a couple weeks ago and I read a text which explicitly identified Moses as the Messiah of God, right? So it has a pretty flexible term, the term Messiah itself, and doesn't really come to solidify into I guess the Greek translation Christos. You see it taking on this firm expression as it's applied to Jesus, right? And then certainly Bar Kokhba was identified as a Messiah, and you have others from this period of time, like the 1st century CE, 2nd century CE, who are also then identified as Mashiach. But it's an interesting question in terms of like an historical investigation of where this term came from and how its meaning developed over time. I'm sure somebody's done the work on that, but I can't think of anything specifically offhand.
Thank you, JR. I was typing Baal, and the spell check put Belial.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hey, yep. Wayne Rossi says, can you recommend a commentary on Isaiah?
I would always start with the Hermania series. There's the Hermania commentary on first
some of those are,
and they're pricey. But that'd be a good place to start for a critical perspective that would really, deal with the texts and not come from a position of doctrine or of harmonization or trying to defend a particular faith stance, but very scholarly.
Some of I think the Hermaniah commentary for Deutero Isaiah might be a little old. Unless they've got something new, I don't know. But I was gonna say Hugh Williamson has he published the first volume on, I think he's doing the whole book, but his first volume, which is I think Isaiah 1-16, was just recently published. It's 5 years old.
Nice.
Maybe, I think. So that's a pretty good one. But again, it's
just 16 chapters, and he's working on the rest of them. Wow.
Yeah. So, but yeah, Hermaniah is good. Anchor Bible is really good too. And those are sort of like within biblical scholarship, those are sort of like the industry standards, the industry standard texts for critical scholars to consult. Hermaniah, which is published by Fortress Press, and the Anchor Bible, which is published by Doubleday and Yale University Press.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. Last one, and then I'll get out of here and let you enjoy the rest of your weekend. Zachary, what New Testament equals Jewish Christian? Revelation, James, Matthew. So pretty much what literature in the New Testament would you say is like a Jewish Christian?
Oh, I see.
Yeah, definitely those. It's hard because it's all on a spectrum. And so, I mean, it just depends. I don't think that there was an older generation of scholarship really liked to build a kind of iron curtain between, Judaism on the one hand and Hellenism on the other. And more recent scholarship recognizes that all Judaism was Hellenized Judaism
right.
in the time that we're talking about. So it's not as simple as saying, well, these are Greek ones and then these are Jewish ones. I mean, Paul is extremely Jewish, but he is also very comfortable in the Hellenized world. The stories that he's living with are the stories of the patriarchs, the stories of the law and the prophets. But he is fleshing them out in a way that, I mean, he is the thing that made Christianity palatable to the Roman world. And if it wasn't for him, it's questionable whether Christianity would have succeeded like it did in the Roman world. But Paul was Jewish. Yeah, I think that
according to Paul, he was the best Jew.
Yeah.
The most humble. Definitely the least. But he worked harder than everyone. He'll let you know how much he worked harder than all of them. seriously, I appreciate you guys. Got to give you a quick little plug here as we're wrapping up this video. Subscribe to Dr. Kip Davis. Did we get you some subscribers today? Let's see if we got you some subscribers.
Oh, did you? Did I get any?
I don't know. I can't see because it still says putting in the chat
We
room.
actually have fewer now. Weird.
Damn, why is that?
Probably.
Oh, God.
That's funny.
So, and Matthew's too. Subscribe. I want to see if we can get some people who haven't subscribed to you, Matthew, that are watching the stream right now. Christine's laughing at you.
Yeah, I'll laugh it up.
God, is he wearing a shirt? Oh yeah, he's wearing a shirt. All right, we'll give him
Skin
colored shirt. Yeah. Any final words from you guys?
There's a couple things coming up. I'm going to be with Dr. Josh and Derek on Secular Soapbox on Monday evening, talking about the documentary Hypothesis. So please check that out. I am also going to be at the University of Helsinki the first week of May, and on Star Wars Day, May the 4th, I'm giving a public lecture titled "These Things Are Written That You May Believe: Sellers, Scholars, Apologists, and the Fake Dead Sea Scrolls." So I'm working with the people there now to try and figure out if we can stream it, or at least record it and then broadcast it later. But yeah, I hope that that's something I can. And if anybody's in Helsinki, then like come to the lecture. So
what time is that going to be on Monday?
5 o'clock Pacific.
Okay.
So I think that's 8 o'clock Eastern.
Making sure.
Make sure you show up.
Yeah, I gotta make sure. I make sure I show up to listen to you guys tell everybody, because I
don't know, or because Josh and I probably got this. If you've got something else that you need to get done.
Well, yeah, I hear you. I think I'm
pressing.
picking up what you're putting down. I think I understand what you're trying to say here.
Non-fraud scholars only.
No pressure at all on getting the course done. We should tease everybody just to let them know I am working right now on an 18 lecture course with Kip. Kip recorded it. I just am trying to edit it all together. Then Ryan, my queen upstairs, is going to be packaging it all and getting it right. And then it'll be up for sale. It helps the scholars such as Kip. It helps MythVision. It keeps spreading the information. And it goes through everything: human sacrifice, polytheism, the tribe clan kind of dynamics in ancient Israel. You name it. We get to apocalyptic. Yeah, and there's some really cool iconic scenes from huge famous shows that we've seen that play a role in him teaching this course. But it's a lot of information. It's a lot. Okay. It's a lot. Trust me. But yeah, thank you.
So it's coming.
That is coming. Very soon.
Okay.
Good. Soon. Not 3.5 years, not 1,260 days.
Not 1,260 days.
None of that. Seriously, though, I really appreciate you for coming on, Kip. And Matt. Matt doesn't do this kind of stuff.
Nope.
He's probably burnt on both ends right now. He's probably I got to take a nap.
I'm gonna sleep 12 hours.
This is my first non-Twitter exchange with Matt. So
good to meet you.
I do believe. I do believe you are. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you're reviewing. Lydia McGrew's book right now, aren't you?
Yeah. Well, I've been reading a chapter a week, and it gets harder and harder to finish the book. The farther I get into it, the less energy I have for it. But the goal, I want to.
But you are.
What's that?
but I was going to say, I mean, you and Ben, the amateur exegete,
and non-alchemist. Yeah, we were gonna
You're all
get together
putting
after
something
we all
together,
finished
right?
reading it and just have a discussion about it, because I think it definitely deserves. It needs responses.
I'm waiting on that, man.
Yeah,
You know, no matter what, this is some. Hey, I'm going to predict something. This is a prediction which is going to prove that I'm a prophet. Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
Buckle up, Buttercup, and clip this, because this is the case. I predict. Hold on. I predict that after your review and after you and the others get together and you rip this thing into pieces and then give a praise here or there, because that's what will end up happening. You'll say, oh, wow, she noticed something I never really paid attention to. Cool. Because that's a cool guy that you are. But once you give a critical assessment of her material, that's right, a cool guy. You can pay me later. The people who are what are called McPologists, they are the McCrew apologists. No matter what you say, they're not going to change their views. It doesn't matter what you say.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't expect that, but
I'm predicting it. I'm standing here today. Call me a false prophet if I'm wrong about this. You're not going to change a single person's mind that follows the McCrew's position at all, because they're right. You know that, right? You're actually wrong.
And I'm resisting the truth. Yeah,
right.
I have no doubt. Oh, yeah, no, but I'm seriously, I am very excited to see what you guys.
We're reading it so that you don't have to.
Yes, thank God. Thank you. Thank you. If I could, one more thing. I recently wrote a book review, and published it over at the Amateur Exegete, that people should check out if they're interested in stuff that I do write sometimes. So if people are interested in stuff that I write.
You did a killer review of Francesca's book, but really reviewing. You give a good assessment. Yeah, that was really good. So, where's the link to that? I'll put it in the chat right now.
Oh, okay. Just go to the Amateur Exegete. It's I think now it's like the third post on there. It's called "Good God: An Anatomy of a Terrible, Horrible, No Good Book Review."
Great title. Great.
So it's pretty long. It's like, but it's not as long as Joel's book review.
Where's it at?
Just scroll down on this.
Scroll down on here, and it'll. Oh, okay. There. Good God, an anatomy of a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad book review. Guest post by Davis.
So I was Ben took a picture of his copy of God and Anatomy for the blog post splash page. And unfortunately, he's got like the shitty American one, so it's not the super sexy blue cover. But that's just,
Well, guys,
yeah, this is fun.
This is good.
I'm outie. I'm heading out. Don't worry, Kip. I promise to start continuing editing this, and I'm gonna need that download so we can keep doing what we're doing. I'm watching the time, brother. I'm watching the time. It is the last hour, So, all right, guys.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
Good to see you guys.
Never forget, we are MythVision. Hit the like button. Love you guys.